like, listen, it sucks that he's gone. It sucks. Raptors with Kawhi equals better team. I don't think anyone's disputing that. But is there a bit of an air in this city that, we can't get a championship. We can never win a championship. Is there a bit of an air of the hungry city that got fed and is now judging the cooking?
That's a good way to put it. I mean, I think it's fair to be a little disappointed. Not that so much they left, but what it means is you don't have that kind of 6 months or a year, whatever it ends up being, that period of just reveling in it, right? And had Kawhi stayed, I mean, it would have been a celebration in its own. It would have guaranteed anything, but you wouldn't have known you're not going to be competing or winning an NBA title until you were eliminated, pretty much. And I think the fact that he left, what's frustrating, I think, for Raptors fans, with some justification, is what should be and what is the greatest moment in the franchise's history is it's kind of the legs are taken out. The air's taken out of the balloon really quickly. And it doesn't mean that the experiences people just had were any less spectacular. It just means that, it's like being at the greatest party you've ever been at, and you got to have you got to be at work at 7 a.m. the next day. Boom, you don't have much time to kind of lounge around over breakfast and talk about what happened. So, I think that's I think that's fair. I mean, it's no one's fault, but it's disappointing that 3 weeks after you won an NBA title, you're talking about a completely different team and the fact your best player is not going to be there anymore.
Sportsnet NBA insider Michael Grange joining us here on the starting lineup. George and Steve, Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Michael, when we read that report and the numerous reports over the weekend that Paul George allegedly was willing to come to the Raptors to play with Kawhi Leonard, do you really believe that, or the Raptors were essentially just leverage in all this, that the Thunder could get what they wanted from the Clippers?
I don't know is a short answer. I mean, I think, there was some reports that Russell Westbrook was attached to that. And I don't think there was any interest or appetite from the Raptors' point of view to have Westbrook playing under contract for them. I don't think Kawhi Leonard wanted to play with Westbrook. Had they been able to make a deal to bring Paul George and a couple other pieces, I'm sure they would have made it. But when you look at what the Clippers were able to, the Thunder were able to get from the Clippers, I mean, it was a better haul. They had more picks. The Raptors didn't have Miami's 2021 unprotected first. They don't have Miami's 2023 protected first. I think they don't have a guy in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, Pascal Siakam, I guess, is a pretty good piece, but I think ultimately, you look at the Clippers had more pieces to give, and that was probably the difference. So I think if the Clippers hadn't been able to provide a couple of those extra assets, then maybe the deal would have swung the way that it did for the Raptors, and it would have ended up with Paul George here. But that's not how it went.
Do you think that there's anything to the fact that maybe Masai Ujiri didn't want to get pushed around in these Kawhi Leonard negotiations? It's because we talked about it. You were in studio with Steve and I. The Raptors did absolutely everything to appease Kawhi Leonard, and they ultimately won the championship. But for him to come to the Raptors and say, it has to be Paul George, otherwise I'm not going to re-sign there, is that kind of holding the Raptors hostage, and maybe Masai Ujiri wouldn't be buying that? He's the president. He has the direction of the franchise. I'm going to make the decisions and not the player. Do you think there's anything to that?
I certainly hope there's not, right? Like, I mean, I'd be shocked if there would be. This is a guy who traded DeMar DeRozan, and we know how all that worked out. But I mean, he fired Dwayne Casey. I mean, these are guys he had long relationships with, who had tremendous amount of respect and equity in the market, were very good at what they did, and it was the side jury is a guy who built a organization based on a kind of family ethic. And, he sent away those guys. Why did he do it? Because he wanted to win. He needed to win. I think if he really had a chance to get Paul George and keep Kawhi Leonard, and, he didn't do it because somehow it was coming at the insistence of Kawhi Leonard. I mean, I just don't see it. I think if there'd been an opportunity to keep this thing rolling, he would have taken it. To the extent he didn't, he either didn't have the opportunity, or the deal wasn't the deal wasn't good enough. It wasn't what wouldn't have got it done. So I don't think I can't imagine Masai Ujiri allowing his ego to get in the way of winning another title.
We sort of had the brief conversation. I made the bold prediction that the Raptors could pass the Leafs in popularity in the city, and I think if they got Kawhi to stay, they absolutely would have. That's maybe dampened a bit for now, but do you think this maybe set the foundation for basketball potentially passing hockey in this city, not necessarily the country, but in this city at some point in the future?
Well, I think, you make a good point there. I mean, I was really interested to see, were they able to run it back? Could they consolidate what they've, what we obviously saw, everyone saw in the last 2-3 months? Could they kind of leverage that? And when I say they, I mean the team itself. I mean, basketball organizations across the country, corporate Canada, all these forces kind of finally acknowledging, particularly corporate Canada, finally acknowledging that, there's a massive appetite out there, and how can we make it work for us and all that. So that would have been interesting to see. I think that'll be set back a little bit. But to your point, I mean, what this franchise has done, it's not just that they won the title, but they've had 6 years of being an elite NBA team. And, those are, when you look at the long span of the history as it relates to franchises, you need those moments. And, there's a reason the Leafs are still the Leafs. And part of it is because, they won 4 titles in the 1960s, and people's grandparents, that's still one of the most formative experiences of their lives. And so they pass that on down to their sons and daughters and all of that. And so I think that's where we are right now with the Raptors, is that it's, you're very early in the franchise's history still. And the foundation, to your point, is broader and more sturdy maybe than it's ever been, more than anyone ever realized it could be. And I think as it relates specifically to hockey, there's a demographic power that's kind of hard to ignore. And on one hand, you've got hockey, elite level hockey, I'll say, like recreational hockey is still pretty accessible, but elite level hockey is there's a lot of barriers there. And I think under the basketball side of things, it's a sport that's a lot more accessible to a lot more people. And over time, the math is probably going to be inescapable.
Michael, we know that narrative now, that gross narrative we're all tired of hearing, that the Raptors can attract American superstar free agents to sign with the team. I know they had big-time guys within the team re-up their contracts, but for free agents to sign with Toronto, do we really need to change our focus? R.J. Barrett is breaking into the NBA with the Knicks, and if he turns into a superstar, do we need to get to the point where Canadian basketball is going, that maybe these Canadian stars like an R.J. Barrett and Jamal Murray in 5 years want to come play for the Raptors and play home? And maybe that's what we need to kind of start focusing on moving forward when it comes to free agents in the future.
Well, I think there's 2 parts to that question. I think the short answer is yes. I mean, I think the Raptors have the potential, as the Canadian basketball population and population of elite pros grows, that you have more chance than not to be in one of those all things being equal situations. I'd rather play at home. And whether it's R.J. Barrett or, Jamal Murray or, go on down this list, it's going to be expanding and expanding. I would think at one point it's going to pay off. But I think, what people need to understand is you don't really build an NBA title with free agents. There's certainly some very high-profile examples of that happening, but the stage that the Raptors are heading to, and when you look at why did the Los Angeles Clippers, why were they able to do this? Well, because they had in a very smart, aggressive, prudent way gathered both the assets on their roster and the assets in terms of draft picks and things like that put them in a position to make an aggressive move and get a Paul George and then convince a Kawhi Leonard. Why were the Raptors able to get Kawhi Leonard? Because they had the assets. They had developed the Jakob Poeltl. They had the, DeMar DeRozan had gone from a kind of a borderline all-star to a third-team All-Pro. So I think, really the stage the Raptors are heading at now, where it's transitional, but I think the next 2, 3, 4 years is where you're really going to have a chance to build an NBA championship team. And it's going to take probably a little bit of losing. It's going to take some very aggressive, forward-thinking trades. You're going to have to do the things that do all those kind of less sexy things. And then you either have a team where you've got your own homegrown superstars and it's very sustainable and you've got to put yourself in a position to win for a long time, or you have such a treasure trove of assets that you can go out and make those trades to acquire the types of players that put you over the top. So I do think that at some point in the future, and it could be any time, but I think over time it'll be proven true, you are going to be, you're going to benefit from having 20, 25 NBA players from Canada in the league. And so it's one of those guys is going to maybe give you the benefit of the doubt because it is at home. But really, it's only going to work if you do all the kind of hard work of, building an infrastructure that they want to come home to.